What if I told you, there's a speech that was once delivered behind locked doors, and then systematically wiped from existence? Not because it failed, but because it went too far. Too visionary. Too disruptive. Too dangerous. In 2003, long before Xi Jinping became the most powerful man in China, he gave a private address, a briefing never meant for public ears. A speech that challenged not only the structure of the Chinese state, but the very future of how power would be controlled, recorded, and remembered. No videos exist. No official record remains. But traces were left, hidden in corrupted AI archives, whispered through censored poetry, echoed in an unexplained 17-second signal glitch that aired once and never again. This is the story of the voice that was never recorded. And maybe, just maybe, it was never meant to be. The echoes in the corridor. It began with a whisper. Not in the public halls of Zhongnanhai or across the state-controlled news broadcasts, but in the narrow corridors that connect the heart of China's political machine. A rumor, persistent, strangely specific, and utterly unverifiable, surfaced among civil servants and mid-level officials, that in 2003, Xi Jinping gave a speech so radical, so unlike the party's polished rhetoric, it had to be erased from history. The alleged location. A confidential policy retreat in Hangzhou, in a room that, according to security protocols, had no recording devices. Yet someone claimed there was one. A stenographer. She wasn't named in the rumors, just referred to as the woman with the memory of thunder. Because while no one could produce the recording, she supposedly transcribed every word by hand, then disappeared. What exactly did he say? Those who believed the story painted Xi as a rising star with ideas that danced dangerously close to anti-orthodoxy, an embrace of digital transparency, a call for self-regulation within the party, even a poetic reflection on the psychological cost of control. He'd allegedly warned that a nation that cannot tolerate dissent is not strong, only silent. It's hard to imagine those words coming from the man we know now. But the tale persisted, especially after 2010, when a now-defunct blog published a short post claiming, "The speech you'll never hear defined the future you're now living." It was immediately scrubbed from the web, but not before screenshots circulated on dark corners of Chinese forums. Then came the oddities. A literary magazine printed a poem under a pseudonym, its stanzas eerily aligned with phrases whispered to belong to that speech. A tech journal reported that an AI speech synthesis model built in 2004 contained ghost data it couldn't explain, sentences that didn't belong to any official archive but bore the cadence of Chinese state rhetoric. More disturbingly, a retired broadcaster claimed that during a routine signal test in 2017, a 17-second audio glitch played something like a man quoting Confucius. All of it disconnected, speculative, dangerous to discuss publicly. But in the silence of those who knew better, a shape began to form. What if the speech had existed? What if its removal wasn't about hiding weakness, but erasing an inconvenient truth? And what if pieces of it survived, not in one place, but scattered across the very system that tried to destroy it? This is the story of that speech, not as it was, but as it might have been. A narrative built from vanished blogs, shadowed memories, AI residues, and poetic leaks. A speech never recorded, but somehow never forgotten. The stenographer's memory. The official version of what happened on the day of the cancelled speech had already started to calcify. A scheduling conflict. A sudden internal security directive. A minor health scare. But for Jiang Min, who had taken shorthand notes in room 303 that morning, the story had never been that simple. She hadn't been on the official list of attendees. She wasn't even supposed to be in the building. Her presence had been arranged last minute. Someone else had backed out, and Zhang, young and sharp, had been called in. She remembered vividly the quiet in the hall, the way people whispered instead of speaking, as if the walls were listening. Xi Jinping had walked in 10 minutes early, not surrounded by a large entourage, but with one aide, silent, tall, unreadable. He carried a simple black folder, closed with a single red band. Zhang was struck not just by his presence, but by the way he paused before speaking, as if he were asking himself whether he truly should. And then he spoke. Jiang wrote as he did. Fast. Every word, every pause. Her pencil scratched across the yellow legal pad in swift, economical strokes. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. There was conviction, yes, but also uncertainty. Not in himself, but in how the room would carry his words into the world. She sensed it. A moment suspended between possibility and danger. When the speech was over, the room didn't applaud. No one moved. For a moment, Jiang thought the lights might cut out. Then the aide stepped forward and said only 2 words, "Leave it." They took the folder and left. Everyone filed out like ghosts. Jiang clutched her notepad. The next morning, she was reassigned. No explanation. No chance to speak to anyone who had been there. The building where she worked had no record of her presence that day. It was as if her participation had been a mistake the party didn't want to admit. But she had the notes, buried under floorboards in her grandmother's home, where no camera would see. For years she told no one, not even her husband. Only when he passed in 2014 did she revisit them. The pencil marks had faded. The paper had yellowed. But the words were still there. A month later, she tried to contact an old professor, a man she trusted. But his phone was disconnected. His house empty. His academic records erased. She felt the walls tightening again. The same silence from that day returning like a fog. In 2016, Jiang began to type the speech, anonymously, on an air-gapped laptop. Not to leak it. Not yet. Just to preserve it, before memory failed her. Every night she typed, she was taken back to that room. The voice. The unsaid things between the lines. The speech was dangerous. Not because it attacked the system, but because it envisioned a new one. She hadn't spoken of overthrowing, but of reprogramming. Of turning propaganda into art. Of making ideology beautiful, so that it does not feel like ideology. He used those words. He spoke of a future where control was subtle. Where people would choose their cage, decorate it, praise its construction. He said, "We must make obedience feel like freedom." That was the line Jiang could never forget. She printed 1 copy, stored it in a fireproof box, and then she waited. For what, she didn't know. Until the knock came at midnight. The hidden orders. They said it was just an ordinary day in Zongnanhai. The breeze off Beihai Lake, the silent shuffle of guards, and a stream of red flags barely moving in the wind. But inside the West Wing, deep beneath layers of biometric locks and surveillance-free chambers, something entirely different stirred, something coded not in law, but in silence. Su Wei hadn't spoken in 48 hours. Not because he couldn't, but because he had received an order not to. An order delivered not in writing, not through phone, but in the form of a blank envelope slipped into his tea tray. Inside, a single crimson seal, Xi Jinping's personal insignia, and a phrase he had only seen once before, "The memory must not resurface." What memory? Su thought. He was a mid-level official, working on AI archival reconciliation, a fancy way of saying he sorted through broken digital memories the party no longer wished to remember. But ever since that project in 2003, the one nobody referred to by name, he had known there were truths the party feared more than lies. His screens began glitching again. This was the 3rd time in a week. AI systems from 2001 to 2005 were undergoing standard maintenance, but something strange kept resurfacing, an untagged audio file, 57 seconds long. Each time he played it, the beginning was identical. Static, silence, then 6 words spoken in Xi Jinping's unmistakable voice. China will not be programmed by fear. Then, silence. Su had flagged the file, deleted it, reported it, but it came back, always with a different hash signature. It was as if the system itself was refusing to forget. Across town, in a retired engineer's flat, an elderly woman named Chen Lian was running diagnostics on her decades-old surveillance decryption rig. She was 84, brittle but lucid, and still working on what she called her final puzzle. She had worked in the AI Red Archive program back in the day, assigned to sanitize predictive outputs from early party-trained models. Back then, AI wasn't just smart, it was ideological. It didn't just calculate, it predicted loyalty. One prediction, she remembered, had been deemed anomalous and erased. A future where a rogue speech by a then unknown Xi Jinping would spark dissent not from the people, but from within the Politburo. She had saved the output. Just once. On a crystal data key, sealed in rice paper and duct-taped under her tea cabinet. And now, she was decoding it. The prediction model called it the day of algorithmic doubt. Her hands trembled as she read the lines. Not in language, but code. Across both their paths, unknown to each other, the past was clawing its way forward, not with force, but with pattern. Not through memory, but machine recursion. The party had deleted the speech, but the systems remembered the rhythm, the cadence, the emotional vectors. And emotion, as it turned out, was harder to erase than words. In one of the reconstructed logs, Sue found a reference. Project Wuling, initiate suppression protocol on any fragment resembling phase echo. Deploy cloaking sequence by Yun. By Yun. The White Cloud. A protocol designed to overwrite not just data but any metadata that might suggest data once existed. But it wasn't working. The speech, or echoes of it, were bleeding through the seams of time. And in those seams, people like Sue and Chen were starting to listen. Not out of curiosity, but out of fear that the system had decided to speak again. The conductor who disappeared. The day after the tape went missing, rumors began to swirl, not about the contents of the message, but about the man who had once guarded the secrets of every rehearsal, every performance, every private word whispered behind studio doors. Li Jun, known simply as the conductor, wasn't a musician. He was an archivist, an engineer, and in some sense, a ghost. His job was to oversee recordings and transmissions at one of Beijing's most secure state-run broadcast facilities. And on the morning of August 4, 2015, he vanished. No resignation, no goodbye. No camera caught him leaving the building. But when his ID was scanned just once, at precisely 3:47 a.m., the system registered an impossible access. Vault Room B, where analog backup reels were kept, a place that required dual biometric clearance. No one else had entered. And by dawn, the vault was empty. Every reel dated between 2001 and 2006, gone. What followed wasn't an official investigation. It was a quiet storm, the kind that only makes noise in the hallways of internal committees and echo chambers of the party's higher echelons. Whispers of Li Jun's disappearance never made the press. But within Zongnanhai, those whispers became warnings. You see, Li Jun wasn't just a technician. In his youth, he was a poet, quietly publishing under the pen name He Yu. His small volumes of verse had once been passed hand to hand in university circles, known for their strange rhythm and curious metaphors. But by 2007, he had gone silent, both as a writer and as a public figure. No interviews, no appearances, just silence. Except, 6 months after he vanished, a small press in Hunan province published an anonymous poetry collection titled Dust in Code. The language was dense, obscure. But for those who knew how to listen, something strange emerged. Each poem's title was a number. 11.6, 12.9, 3.18. When aligned with known dates of party conferences, regional summits, or obscure propaganda rollouts, a timeline began to form. The lines themselves, fragmented, evocative, read like warnings. He speaks not for applause but for memory. They feared what he did not yet say. Scholars, activists, and a few rogue journalists began comparing these verses with leaked notes from the old stenographer files. And piece by piece, the cadence of the lost speech re-emerged, not as a complete transcript, but as a ghost language hidden within literature. That's when it got strange. The publisher's office caught fire. No one was injured, but every unsold copy of Dust and Code went up in flames. Li Jun, or whoever had sent the manuscript, was never traced. But someone had taken extraordinary measures to ensure the words were noticed, and then erased again. But not all copies burned. A single copy surfaced on an encrypted forum used by exiled Chinese dissidents. In its margins, handwritten notes matched the stenographer's phrasing. Someone, perhaps the conductor himself, was still orchestrating from the shadows. Next transition title: The Final Frequency. The last sequence. The silence after the final note lingered in the air like the breath before a confession. In the control booth of the broadcasting tower, the red light had stopped blinking, but something else had started pulsing, an unease, a tremor beneath the surface of Beijing's late-night calm. They had heard it. Not all of it, but enough. The feed had been terminated within 17 seconds. Long enough for static to resolve into whispers, and whispers to hint at something deeper. A speech long buried, not just resurfacing, but speaking directly to the present. The echoes of that voice, distorted, truncated, undeniably Xi's, had reignited more than memory. It had triggered a hunt. Within an hour, the Central Propaganda Department convened. The faces were older now, more hardened. The phrase, technical error, was floated around like incense, meant to mask, not clarify. But the room's air wasn't reverent. It was electric with fear. For years they had buried the past, but now it had spoken for itself. The audio engineers were interrogated first. Where did the data come from? They were asked. What drive? What cache? What script? But no trace of the source existed. It had slipped through firewalls, file systems, even physical logs. An anomaly without an origin. Down in the archives, Chen, now a deputy director, pulled out a dusty maintenance log from 2003. He wasn't supposed to keep it, but old habits die hard. It showed nothing unusual, except for a single entry scratched in different handwriting, 701-17X, pending restoration. Room 701 again. The last time anyone mentioned it officially, the Ministry of State Security was still restructuring. It had once housed early voice modeling experiments, basic text-to-speech trials, before the party moved operations to more secure campuses. But the room's acoustics had been perfect. Every whisper recorded. Every silence preserved. Now, years later, the room was sealed off. But the signal, the last signal, was traced to a hidden buffer node still active inside its walls. Someone had rerouted a backup cache. Someone who knew the old systems. Someone who still remembered. A shadow crew was dispatched that night. No badges. No names. They entered Building C with a single instruction: extract and erase. But as they activated the old drives, they found not just one speech, but a library. Hidden caches of old simulations, voices never broadcast, arguments never aired. And amid them, one file stood out: Sequence Omega. They played it. It was Xi, but not as the world knew him. Younger, raw, urgent. He spoke of futures denied, of choices made in silence, of the burden of those who knew too much, too soon. And when it ended, the room didn't move. Not out of awe, but because in the final seconds, Xi's voice broke. Just slightly. Enough to feel real. The file was deleted. But not before someone heard it again. Someone always hears. And the voice that was never recorded was never really silent. So, what do you believe? Was it just a rumor? A political ghost story whispered in closed circles? Or did Xi Jinping truly deliver a speech so bold, so dangerous, that it had to be erased from history? If the voice was never recorded, why do pieces of it still echo through literature, broken code, and lost broadcasts? Maybe the real question isn't whether the speech happened. Maybe it's why we're still not allowed to hear it. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, if it sparked curiosity, or if you believe there's more hiding behind the silence, then share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Xi where untold stories rise to the surface, one erased moment at a time.